Hello, YouTube, and welcome back. And today I'm very excited. We are, for the first time ever, going to be exploring somewhere new. Now, if you're able to see where we are right now, we are not in the Magic Kingdom. In fact, we're actually on the West Coast today for Disneyland's 70th anniversary. Today, we are looking at Disneyland, and more importantly, we are looking at Disneyland because this is a very exciting time to be a Disneyland fan as Walt Disney World has continued to grow and evolve. Disneyland might actually be getting the next theme park. So, we've heard a lot of rumblings over the years about Disneyland since Disney California Adventure. This whole Disneyland Forward project and building up the infrastructure and actually creating more expansion for Disneyland. It sounds like at this point, Disney is moving toward building a third gate. That's right, a third theme park coming to Disneyland Resort. And at this point, it's been basically 3 decades in the waiting. It was just a matter of when. Now, Disneyland recently filed a building permit with the city of Orange County, California, which is Anaheim, tied to a site identified in Disneyland Forward. And this multi-year development plan pretty much seems like is paving the way for that third gate in Anaheim. And this is huge for Disneyland Resort because back in the day before Disney California Adventure in the 2000s, this was always seen as it's a one-day park. You go to Disneyland. Yeah, the nostalgia for Disneyland is there, but you're only going to the one park. And today in 2026, that is definitely not the case anymore. Disneyland Park itself is a massive park with lots going on. It may not have the size in terms of actual foot traffic and acres as Walt Disney World, but there is a lot to do in this one park. And when you consider Disneyland and now Disney California Adventure, which when it opened really wasn't even seen as an option. A lot of people would not visit Disney California Adventure, but now the game is really changing over at DCA as well. And maybe we'll take a stop over there because I think we're kind of remiss in not doing our job if we're not considering Disney's California Adventure here, because that park has changed so much over the last few years in terms of bringing in the Marvel universe, but even further back than that, the redevelopment of Carthay Circle up front and the entire front of the park being redone, right? To removing Bugs Land, putting Marvel in there, having Cars Land, all those types of areas are really changing the way that the perception of DCA is. And I'm actually not sure where I'm going. I've never been to Disneyland, so for me right now, we're kind of just walking around DCA. But yeah, I think it's really interesting when you consider just how much this area has changed over the years. I mean, it really is kind of amazing when you consider what could be next. And that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of this video, because at this point, we don't really know what's coming to this next theme park. And with Cars Land here, with Marvel here, realistically, what could be looking as an IP or a land or an area that could be coming to Disneyland's third theme park. So a couple of ideas that I have, and I would think that you have to try to hit the target audiences, right? I think Disney today is pushing a lot more for, obviously, IP. And I don't love the idea of adding more IP, but I know this is how this is going to be. Disney's not going to take the risk of the non-IP attraction. So let's just go with it's going to be IP. For little boys, what could they target, right? Because Disney kind of has a hard time with that demographic, and that's why Cars Land was such a big deal, and Marvel, because those were targeting that more of a young boy audience, right? So, in terms of that, I don't know how much I would say Indiana Jones. I mean, I know Indiana Jones has its own attraction in Disneyland, but we know how Disney is. I mean, there are multiple attractions, even in Walt Disney World, right? You have Toy Story Land, but you still have standalone attractions for Toy Story, like in other parks, right? So it's not the craziest thing to think that they could do that, right? So maybe in Indiana Jones Land. I love the idea of some kind of Lion King land. I think that is a very big property for Disney, and it's kind of insane that there aren't more dark rides and lands about the Lion King in the Disney theme parks. I think what they're doing in Paris is, kind of the test run. They're going to see how that goes. They're going to give some exclusivity for a couple years to that. And I could very easily see in this new third park, it'll hopefully be 5 to 10 years that there's maybe a little exclusivity. And then we'll start to see maybe Disneyland get a Lion King land. And maybe we'll see Walt Disney World get a Lion King land or attraction, right? So I think that's another IP that could really hit home in that new environment. And obviously for girls, this one I think is pretty easy. I think the 3 or 4 biggest ones, the world of Frozen, considering how successful that has already been overseas, you would have to think that's in the conversation. Another one that I think is kind of interesting, now that we're seeing what's going on with Encanto, I wonder if Encanto could be another one that gets its own land in Disneyland, the new park. I could definitely see that. And then I kind of wonder, how far are we away from a Moana land and seeing some sort of improved presence for Moana? Because I think honestly we could see a combination of all 3 or 4 of those in this new park for Disneyland, because they don't really have a huge presence in Disneyland currently. And I think that it was kind of an interesting decision when Disney, because I'm coming back here for a reason, because I think Coco coming as a dark ride back here in California Adventure, they could have very easily put an Encanto or a Moana attraction or something back here, but they went with Coco. And I think that is really giving them the ability to still build a full land for any 3 or 4 of those pretty popular princess IPs over the last 15 years. It's really giving them the gateway to do whatever they want with those IPs in their own respective areas in a new park. So I think that would be kind of an interesting strategy. Or did they do some kind of, Princess Fairy Tale Hall area where it's almost like a version of Fantasyland, where you just have new attractions for newer princesses, right? For Frozen and Encanto and Moana, and you put them all in the same area. I mean, that could happen too. So there's a lot that they can kind of do in that direction. The idea of Avatar, I think at this point, is not really as popular as it maybe once was. I would love to see some sort of bringing back a concept they had for the Magic Kingdom in the new Fantasyland. There was talk about bringing Pixie Hollow to where Storybook Circus is. And they ended up going with Storybook Circus because they wanted to drive that more of a young boy audience, right? Because they have all the princesses and fairy, in Fantasyland. So maybe they could do something like that in this new area, right? That could really be an interesting idea. Another one that I think maybe more so for, in terms of avoiding the gender specific areas, I think Zootopia is an easy one. We saw how successful that was overseas. I think it was Shanghai. Bring something like that to this new park in Disneyland. I think that would be really, really nice. And I think a lot more people would be excited for that sort of environment as somewhere they would like to go than another Pandora. I know that they have the whole situation with James Cameron, but I don't think people are excited for that. People are not looking forward to that land, right? Like, it's just not really what you're expecting from a Disney park. So I wonder if that's something that maybe they'll stay away from. In terms of more of a kiddie area, I know this is kind of something that we already have seen a lot of, some sort of Toy Story Land maybe. It sounds like such an easy, cheap way of getting that sort of the kiddier attraction area, but I think it could make sense depending on the budget in this sort of environment that maybe they're trying to create. So anyway, that's a couple of my ideas for what this new theme park in Disneyland could look like and maybe what we could see, because I think it's going to be interesting how they do the front of the park. Do they continue to stay with the Disney roots and have the main street, but maybe it's something else. Maybe it's New York, right? Like New York Street as the main entrance, and you come through and you go to all these different areas, or you do something more like Epic Universe, where it's just a dreamer's courtyard, and you just have all the different portals to the different lands, right? Like there's a lot of different directions that they could go in, but I'm kind of curious what you guys think. Let me know down below. What would you like to see for a third Disneyland park? What kind of lands would you like to see? Would you see a Main Street? Let me know some of your ideas down below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.